Listen to me carefully, because this moment is not accidental, and your presence here is not random. Something inside you already knows that you are standing at the edge of a turning point. You have felt the pressure, the resistance, the weight that seems to press against your soul, and you have wondered why the path feels harder now than before. But I tell you with unshakable conviction, when pressure increases, it is not because God has abandoned you, it is because God is preparing to remove every limitation that has held you back. What you are facing is not destruction, it is a test, and this test is not meant to break you, it is meant to unlock you. Many people misunderstand the nature of limitation. They think limitation is an enemy, a wall, a punishment. But limitation is often the doorway God uses to measure what is truly inside a person. When life feels easy, anyone can say they trust God. When provision is abundant, faith sounds beautiful. But when the way forward is blocked, when resources are thin, when answers are delayed, that is when the real substance of your faith is revealed. God does not test you to discover something He does not know. God tests you to reveal to you what you carry and to prepare you for what you are about to receive. You must understand this truth deeply. God does not remove limitations before the test. God removes limitations after the test is passed. Many people pray for open doors, but they resist the pressure that produces the key. They ask God to change their circumstances while refusing to change their spiritual posture. Yet God is not moved by complaints. God is moved by faith that stands firm when circumstances argue otherwise. When you remain faithful under pressure, you are telling heaven that you can be trusted with more. There are moments in life when everything feels constrained. Your finances feel limited. Your opportunities feel limited. Your strength feels limited. Even your hope feels stretched thin. But these moments are not proof that God is absent. They are evidence that God is working deeply. God often allows limitation to surround you so that your dependence shifts from what you can do to who God is. When human ability reaches its end, divine ability begins to manifest. Do not despise the season you are in. The very environment that feels restrictive is shaping your spiritual authority. God never promotes a person who collapses under pressure. Promotion follows endurance. Expansion follows obedience. Breakthrough follows surrender. When you continue to honor God while nothing seems to change, you are passing a test that very few people are willing to endure. There is a dangerous habit many people fall into. When they are tested, they begin to question God's goodness instead of examining their own faithfulness. They ask, "Why is God doing this to me?" When the real question is, what is God producing in me? Tests are not about punishment. They are about preparation. God is not interested in giving you blessings that will crush you. God prepares you internally before releasing you externally. Every limitation you face has a voice. It speaks fear. It speaks doubt. It speaks delay. But there is another voice, quieter but stronger, and that voice is calling you to trust God beyond what you can see. Faith is not denial of reality. Faith is alignment with God's truth in the middle of reality. When you choose faith while the limitation is still present, you are declaring that God's word has more authority than your circumstances. Understand this: God does not remove limitations for those who panic. God removes limitations for those who persevere. Panic reveals fear. Perseverance reveals trust. God is drawn to a heart that refuses to abandon obedience just because the road becomes uncomfortable. When you remain consistent in prayer, integrity, and faith while the pressure increases, you are passing a spiritual examination that qualifies you for enlargement. There are people who gave up one step before their limitation would have been lifted. They mistook resistance for rejection. But resistance is often the final confirmation that you are close to a breakthrough. The enemy resists what threatens him. Fear rises when freedom is near. The weight increases when expansion is imminent. If nothing were about to change, there would be no reason for such intensity. You must stop interpreting hardship as failure. Hardship is often evidence of progress. God trains those He intends to elevate. A person who cannot endure testing cannot sustain freedom. God is not just interested in removing your limitations. God is interested in keeping them from returning. That is why the test must be passed fully, not partially. Partial obedience delays full release. There are moments when God intentionally remains silent, not because He is absent, but because He is observing. Silence reveals what sound cannot. In silence, your motives are exposed. In silence, your faith is purified. In silence, your dependence is tested. Will you still trust God when there is no immediate reassurance? Will you still walk uprightly when no one applauds your obedience? These moments shape spiritual maturity. When you feel like giving up, remember this: the test is not bigger than the promise. The pressure is not stronger than God. The limitation is not permanent. God never allows a test without already preparing a way of escape through growth, endurance, and transformation. But that escape is activated through faith, not frustration. Faith is not passive. Faith is an active decision to stand aligned with God even when emotions fluctuate. You may feel tired, but faith says God is your strength. You may feel uncertain, but faith says God is your guide. You may feel confined, but faith says God is your source. Faith does not ignore reality. It speaks God's authority over reality. God is watching how you respond when the door does not open immediately. Do you become bitter or do you become better? Do you complain or do you consecrate yourself more deeply? Every response is recorded in the spiritual realm. Every choice either accelerates or delays your release. God honors those who honor Him under pressure. There is a refining power in waiting. Waiting strips pride. Waiting exposes impatience. Waiting teaches humility. Those who rush ahead of God often create limitations they later beg to escape. But those who wait in faith inherit strength, clarity, and authority. Waiting is not wasted time when it is anchored in trust. Let this truth settle in your spirit. The test you are facing is proof that God sees potential in you. God does not test what He does not value. God does not refine what He does not intend to use. If your life were insignificant, there would be no opposition, no resistance, no pressure. The fact that you are being tested means your future carries weight. When you pass this test, something will shift. The same God who allowed the limitation will remove it with precision and purpose. When God removes a limitation, it does not return. When God opens a door, no force can close it. When God expands your capacity, no circumstance can shrink it. But first, your faith must demonstrate consistency. Consistency is powerful. Not dramatic faith, not emotional declarations, but quiet, daily obedience moves the heart of God. Showing up in prayer when you feel weak. Choosing integrity when compromise seems easier. Speaking hop. When silence would be more comfortable. These choices accumulate spiritual authority that no limitation can withstand. Do not underestimate the power of obedience in hidden seasons. God sees what others ignore. God rewards what others dismiss. When you remain faithful when no one is watching, God prepares to move publicly on your behalf. Hidden faith produces visible breakthroughs. The limitation you face today is not meant to define you. It is meant to refine you. When you emerge from this season, you will not only be free, you will be stronger, wiser, and more anchored in God than before. The test is shaping your spiritual backbone so that freedom does not intoxicate you and success does not destroy you. Hold on, stand firm, refuse to retreat into fear or bitterness. Lift your expectation, not based on what you see, but based on who God is. God is faithful beyond human understanding. God is powerful beyond natural law. God is intentional beyond human planning. What God has promised cannot be canceled by temporary resistance. Even now, as pressure surrounds you, something is aligning. What feels delayed is being arranged. What feels restricted is being measured. God is ensuring that when the limitation is removed, you will step into freedom with wisdom, humility, and authority. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not failing. You are being tested. And when this test is passed, not by force, not by manipulation, but by faith, obedience, and trust in God, the limitations that once defined your boundaries will dissolve, and your life will move into a dimension that fear could never imagine, a dimension shaped by surrender, sustained by faith, and governed by the unchanging power of God who watches, refines, and releases those who refuse to let go even when the weight is heavy and the road feels narrow. Because they know that the same God who allowed the test also holds the authority to remove every limitation at the appointed moment and expand their life beyond what they once believed was possible. There is a moment in every life when God brings a person to a narrow place, not to trap them, but to reveal what truly governs their heart. Wide paths hide weaknesses, but narrow paths expose them. When your options are reduced, when alternatives disappear, when distractions are stripped away, what remains is the raw condition of your trust. God allows this narrowing not to suffocate you, but to align you. In the narrow place, faith becomes focused. In the narrow place, obedience becomes clear. In the narrow place, you stop negotiating with truth and begin surrendering to it. Many people think freedom comes from having more choices, but true freedom comes from clarity of direction. God removes distractions before removing limitations. If your life were expanded before your heart was aligned, the expansion itself would become a burden. So God teaches you to walk straight before allowing you to walk wide. This is why the test often feels isolating. God is not pulling you away from people. God is pulling you closer to purpose. Do not confuse isolation with abandonment. Isolation is often divine positioning. When God separates you from noise, it is because your next instruction requires focus. When God removes familiar supports, it is because reliance must shift upward. Dependence on God grows strongest when dependence on everything else is reduced. This is not loss, this is recalibration. You must recognize the spiritual weight of obedience. Obedience is not weakness. Obedience is alignment with authority. When you obey God in seasons where it costs you comfort, convenience, or recognition, you are proving that your faith is not transactional. God does not respond to faith that obeys only when it benefits. God responds to faith that obeys because He is God. There is a depth of trust that only develops when obedience feels unreasonable to the natural mind. This is where limitation becomes sacred ground. You are learning to move without full visibility, to step without complete understanding, to trust without immediate confirmation. This kind of faith reshapes a person from the inside. It produces spiritual stamina. It builds inner authority. It establishes unshakable confidence in God. Do not underestimate what is happening within you right now. Even if nothing around you has changed, something within you is being fortified. Patience is being strengthened. Discernment is being sharpened. Humility is being deepened. These are not small things. These are the foundations that sustain expansion. Without them, freedom collapses into chaos. God watches how you handle delay. Delay reveals whether your faith is rooted in desire or in devotion. Desire demands immediacy. Devotion accepts timing. When you honor God's timing without resentment, you are passing a test that many fail silently. Resentment poisons faith. Gratitude preserves it. Even in limitation, gratitude declares trust. You must guard your inner language. What you say to yourself in private shapes what you can receive in public. If your inner dialogue is filled with fear, doubt, and self-condemnation, you are reinforcing the walls of limitation. But when your inner language aligns with trust, humility, and expectation, you are loosening those walls. God responds to hearts that speak truth, even when circumstances speak otherwise. This is not the time to shrink your faith to match your environment. This is the time to expand your faith, so your environment must eventually follow. Faith is not loud arrogance. It is quiet certainty. It is waking up every day and choosing to believe that God is working even when evidence is delay. D. It is continuing to walk uprightly even when shortcuts appear attractive. Shortcuts are the enemy of preparation. They promise relief without transformation. But anything gained without preparation becomes a source of pressure later. God is protecting you from premature freedom. Freedom without maturity becomes another form of bondage. That is why God insists on the test. The test ensures that when limitation is removed, it does not return in another form. You are being trained to carry weight, responsibility, influence, provision, authority. All of these require internal structure. God builds structure through testing. Pressure reveals cracks so they can be repaired before expansion. This is mercy, not severity. God is more invested in your long-term stability than your short-term comfort. When you feel misunderstood during this season, do not rush to defend yourself. Silence under misunderstanding builds strength. God sees truth even when people distort it. Vindication that comes from God lasts longer than validation that comes from people. Focus on integrity, not image. Integrity outlives opinion. You may feel that your prayers are repetitive, that your efforts feel unnoticed, that your faith feels stretched thin. But consistency in hidden seasons accumulates unseen momentum. God counts what you think is insignificant. Every act of obedience, every moment of restraint, every decision to trust adds weight to your spiritual account. There comes a point in testing where fatigue sets in, not because you are weak, but because endurance is being exercised. This is where many retreat, but if you remain, something shifts. Fatigue gives way to resilience. Doubt gives way to clarity. Fear gives way to quiet confidence. This is the moment when limitation begins to lose its grip. You must remember that God is not confined by systems, timelines, or human expectations. Hat seems delayed to you may be perfectly timed in the realm beyond your sight. God is arranging circumstances, aligning people, adjusting outcomes in ways you cannot track. Trusting God means trusting the unseen process as much as the visible result. The test also reveals where your identity truly rests. If your sense of worth collapses under limitation, then your identity was tied to outcomes. But when your identity remains anchored even when outcomes are uncertain, you are rooted in God. God is not impressed by performance. God honors alignment. When your identity is secure, limitation loses its power to define you. Let your faith become quieter and stronger. You do not need to announce what God is doing. You do not need to explain your process to everyone. God does his deepest work in silence. When the limitation lifts, the result will speak without explanation. You are learning to trust God beyond emotional confirmation. Feelings fluctuate. God does not. Anchoring your faith in God's character rather than your emotional state is a sign of maturity. Mature faith does not demand constant reassurance. It stands firm because it knows who God is. This season is teaching you discernment. Not every voice deserves access to your spirit. Not every opinion carries wisdom. Limitation sharpens discernment by forcing you to listen more carefully. Guard what you allow into your mind. Feed your spirit with truth, not speculation. Faith grows where truth is honored. You are closer than you think. Often the final stage of testing feels the most intense because resistance is losing ground. Stay steady. Do not abandon what you know to be true because of temporary discomfort. Stability under pressure is a rare strength, and God honors it. When the limitation is removed, it will not feel chaotic. It will feel aligned. Peace will accompany expansion. Clarity will replace confusion. Strength will replace strain. God does not release abruptly without preparation. When freedom comes, it will feel like the natural next step, not a shocking disruption. Until that moment, remain faithful. Not anxious faith, not desperate faith, but grounded faith. Let trust replace striving. Let surrender replace control. Let obedience replace urgency. God is not late. God is precise. God is thorough. God is faithful. And even now, as you continue to walk through this test, unseen shifts are occurring. Internal structures are being completed, and spiritual capacity is being expanded so that when the limitation finally lifts, you will step forward not merely relieved, but transformed, carrying a depth of trust, strength, and clarity that could only have been formed by walking closely with God through the narrow place. Learning to stand firm when nothing but faith held you upright, and discovering that what once felt like restriction was actually the ground where endurance, authority, and unwavering trust were being built in silence and in truth. There is a sacred exchange taking place in this season that many do not recognize. God is not merely asking you to endure. God is inviting you to transform how you see power. Power is not proven when everything bends to your will. Power is revealed when you remain aligned while nothing moves yet. This is the strength God cultivates, an inner steadiness that does not sway with circumstance. When you learn to remain grounded while outcomes are uncertain, you are learning how to govern your spirit instead of being governed by pressure. God is teaching you restraint. Restraint is not weakness, it is discipline under authority. When you restrain your reactions, your words, your impulses, you are declaring that your trust is not fragile. Many people lose their future not because of lack of opportunity, but because of uncontrol. Responses during testing. God watches reactions more closely than requests. A calm spirit under pressure signals readiness for responsibility. This season is also recalibrating your sense of urgency. Urgency driven by fear produces haste. Urgency driven by trust produces precision. God does not rush, yet God is never slow. There is a divine rhythm that operates beyond human anxiety. When you align with that rhythm, you stop forcing doors and start discerning timing. Discernment saves you from exhaustion. Discernment teaches you when to move and when to remain still. There is a difference between waiting and stagnation. Waiting is active trust. Stagnation is passive fear. In waiting, you remain obedient, alert, and expectant. In stagnation, you withdraw, numb, and doubtful. God strengthens those who wait actively, those who continue to grow internally, even when nothing changes externally. Growth that cannot be seen is still growth, and God honors it. You are also being taught stewardship in limitation. How you handle little reveals how you will handle much. If gratitude disappears when provision is small, abundance will only magnify dissatisfaction. God teaches contentment before expansion, so that increase does not corrupt character. Contentment does not mean lack of ambition. It means peace with process. Peace with process protects your heart. This is the season where your convictions are being clarified. When comfort is removed, truth becomes non-negotiable. You begin to see God uses limitation to strip away false priorities. God uses limitation to strip away false priorities. What remains is purpose refined, faith simplified, and trust deepened. Simplicity strengthens faith. Complexity often hides doubt. You may notice that certain desires are fading while others are intensifying. This is alignment. God reshapes desire before reshaping environment. When your desire align with God's intent, resistance loses its power. Misaligned desire creates inner conflict. Aligned desire creates peace even before resolution. There is also a lesson in humility unfolding. Limitation humbles not by humiliation, but by perspective. You begin to understand how much you depend on God for every breath, every step, every outcome. Humility attracts grace. Grace empowers endurance. Endurance qualifies you for release. This sequence cannot be rushed. God is also teaching you how to listen. In noise, voices compete. In quiet, truth emerges. Limitation reduces noise so that instruction becomes clear. Many answers you seek are already present, but distraction has muffled them. As the noise fades, clarity increases. Clarity brings confidence, and confidence strengthens faith. Do not underestimate the power of alignment between your actions and your beliefs. Faith without alignment weakens over time. Alignment means your private choices agree with your public declarations. God strengthens those whose lives reflect their trust. Integrity is a form of worship. Consistency is a form of devotion. You may feel the weight of responsibility growing even before freedom arrives. This is preparation. God often increases internal capacity before changing external conditions. Capacity determines sustainability. Without capacity, freedom becomes overwhelming. With capacity, freedom becomes fruitful. There is also a refinement of vision happening. Vision during limitation becomes sharper because it is no longer cluttered by excess. You begin to see what truly deserves your energy. Focus is a form of power. God refines focus through restriction so that when expansion comes, energy is directed wisely. Some relationships may feel strained or distant during this time. This is not always loss. Sometimes it is alignment. God shifts your environment to support your next L. Evil. Not everyone who walked with you before is meant to walk with you after. This does not diminish the past, it honors the future. You are learning to trust God's wisdom over your own understanding. Understanding demands explanation. Trust accepts direction. There will be moments when clarity comes only after obedience, not before it. This is the order of faith. Faith moves first, understanding follows. The test also reveals endurance of joy. Joy that depends on outcomes fades quickly. Joy rooted in trust remains steady. God strengthens joy during limitation, so that success does not become the sole source of satisfaction. Joy is strength. A joyful spirit resists despair even in confinement. You are being trained to stand without applause. Applause can distract from purpose. Silence sharpens commitment. God often removes external affirmation so that internal conviction can deepen. When conviction is strong, validation becomes unnecessary. There is a quiet authority forming within you. Authority is not volume. It is presence. It is the ability to remain unmoved by pressure and unshaken by delay. This authority cannot be taught. It must be forged. Limitation is the forge. You are also learning surrender at a deeper level. Surrender is not giving up. It is giving over control. Control resists uncertainty. Surrender embraces trust. When you release control, peace enters. Peace clears your vision. Clear vision strengthens faith. God is shaping your expectations. Unrealistic expectations produce disappointment. Aligned expectations produce resilience. When your expectations align with God's process, disappointment loses its grip. You begin to see value in timing, not just outcome. The longer the test, the deeper the transformation. God is not interested in surface change. God works at the root. Root level change takes time, but it produces lasting freedom. When roots are strong, storms cannot uproot what God has planted. There is also a refining of speech happening. Words spoken under pressure reveal belief. God teaches you to speak life even when surrounded by limitation. Speech aligned with trust reinforces faith. Silence aligned with humility preserves strength. You are learning how to stand alone with God. This is sacred ground. When you can stand alone with God, you are never truly alone. Dependence on God becomes your anchor, not the presence or absence of people. Even now, endurance is being completed, faith is being stabilized, and inner authority is being sealed, so that when the limitation finally gives way, you will not rush recklessly into freedom, but move with wisdom, restraint, clarity, and unshakable trust, carrying within you the evidence of a season walked faithfully with God, where pressure did not distort your purpose, delay did not erode your devotion, and uncertainty did not weaken your alignment, but instead refined your spirit, strengthened your resolve, and anchored your life more deeply in trust than ever before. Now hear this with the deepest part of your spirit, because this is where everything becomes personal. The test you are facing is not abstract, it is intimate. It touches your thoughts, your habits, your fears, your private decisions. And this is where the greatest transformation happens. God is not calling you to admire truth from a distance. God is calling you to embody it. This is the moment to stop asking why the test exists and start asking who you are becoming through it. Look honestly at your life, not with condemnation, but with courage. Examine where fear has been louder than trust, where comfort has been chosen over obedience, where delay has tempted you to compromise. This is not to shame you, but to free you. Awareness is the doorway to renewal. When you see clearly, you can ling deeply. God honors those who are willing to confront themselves without excuses and return fully to trust. Let this be the moment you renew your inner commitment, not with words spoken for others to hear, but with a decision made where no one else sees. Decide that your faith will no longer depend on ease. Decide that your obedience will no longer depend on outcomes. Decide that your trust will no longer fluctuate with circumstances. This decision reshapes everything. Heaven responds to inner alignment long before outer change appears. Draw closer to God, not because you need something, but because you recognize who God is. Nearness changes perspective. Nearness strengthens resolve. When you walk closely with God, limitations lose their power to intimidate you. They become temporary boundaries, not permanent definitions. Nearness reminds you that you are not sustained by conditions, but by trust. Stand up internally, even if externally nothing has shifted yet. Refuse to live bent under pressure. Lift your spirit through trust. Lift your thoughts through truth. Lift your expectations through faith. You do not need permission from circumstances to stand firm. Your authority comes from alignment with God, not from visible evidence. Let endurance complete its work. Do not escape the process early. Do not abandon integrity for relief. Do not trade depth for speed. What is being formed in you now will sustain you long after the limitation is gone. This season is writing strength into your character, wisdom into your decisions, and clarity into your purpose. Carry this truth with you. God has never been distant from your struggle. God has been present in every step, every delay, every quiet moment of perseverance. The same God who allowed the test has been strengthening you through it. Nothing has been wasted. Nothing has been overlooked. Every act of faith has been seen. So walk forward with renewed purpose, not hurried, not fearful, not doubting. Walk forward anchored in trust, grounded in obedience, and strengthened by the knowledge that God honors those who remain faithful when it would be easier to retreat. Let your life reflect the depth of your trust. Let your choices reveal your alignment. Let your endurance testify to your faith. And as you continue on this path, carry with you an unshakable certainty deep within your soul. The test did not come to defeat you. The limitation did not come to define you. And the pressure did not come to destroy you. It came to reveal, refine, and prepare you so that your life would stand as living evidence of what happens when a person chooses to trust God completely, walk faithfully through the narrow place, and emerge strengthened, aligned, and free in spirit, knowing that nothing endured in faith is ever without purpose in the hands of God.